Okay, so we're going to do chapters 27, 28, and 29. So actually I'm just going to move this a little bit. That's my kitchen. Don't look at there. It's messy. There we go. It's a little less messy over here. All right, so we're going to do chapter 27, 28, and 29. And kind of see Pip changing in not such a fantastic way. Okay. So the beginning of chapter 27, Pip gets a letter from Biddy. And the letter pretty much says Joe is coming to London and would like to see you. And if you go down at the very beginning, if we jump just right down to the PS that she writes, the first part just pretty much says Joe's coming to London. The last part is something she did not read to Joe when she was taking down his letter because she didn't want him to know that she wrote it. It says, P.S. He wishes me most particular to write what larks. He says that you will understand. I hope and do not doubt that it will be agreeable to see him, even though you are a gentleman. For you had ever a good heart, and he is a worthy, worthy man. I have read him all excepting only these last little sentences, and he wishes me most particular to write again, what larks. So in Biddy's wise and awesome way, she's calling Pip out again. She's like, you are going to receive him nicely, correct? Because you might be a gentleman, but Joe is a really good guy, and there's no reason to not receive him well when he comes to visit you. Pip doesn't really take that advice so well. I received this letter by post on Monday morning, and therefore its appointment was for the next day. Let me confess exactly with what feelings I looked forward to Pip's coming. To Joe's coming. Not with pleasure. Though I was bound to him by so many ties, no, with considerable disturbance and some mortification and a keen sense of incongruity. If I could have kept him away by paying him money, I certainly would have paid the money. My greatest reassurance was that he was coming to Bernard's Inn, not to the Hammersmith. He was coming to their apartment, not to the place where he has school over at Mr. Pocket's house. I had little objection of his being seen by Herbert or his father, for both of whom I had respect, but I had the sharpest sensitiveness as to his being seen by Drummle, whom I held in contempt. So throughout life, our worst weaknesses and meannesses are usually committed for the sake of the people whom we most despise. We're going to stop real quick. That is a super, super true line. So often we do things in our lives that will make us look bad, or we'll be a jerk because you don't want this person over here to be a jerk. For instance, if you were passing someone in the hallway and you saw a kid being bullied. So that happens, right? So you pass in the hallway, you see some kid getting picked on. And very often, unfortunately, just walk by. Not because you don't dislike the bullying, not because you don't want to stop the bullying, but you walk by because you don't want to be bullied also. Now, do I think this is a bad idea? Absolutely. However, that's what this line is saying. We do things that are not how we would normally act because we don't want to make the people we dislike us more. So God forbid we step in and say something because heaven forbid bully then turns their wrath on you. And so despite the fact Pip knows it's wrong to be ashamed of Joe and not want Drummle to see him, he hides Joe because he would rather feel the shame of hiding Joe than doing the right thing and taking Joe to meet everybody and have Drummle make fun of him. So I want you to think about that next time you're walking by a bully, okay? Because when you're walking by the person and they're being mean, you in your brain think, I would rather walk by, know that it's wrong to walk by, than have the bully me also. Well, put on your big kid pants, get in there, and stop the bullying. Details. Moving on with our lives. Okay, so So Pip realizes that what he's, the way he's about to treat Joe is wrong. But he's just too pig-headed to not. I had got on so fast of late that I even started Boy in Boots. So he's saying, I've been getting so much money from my mysterious benefactor that I hired a servant of sorts. And they call this servant Pepper. I'm not really sure why, but they do. And so he has this servant, but he has the servant only because every gentleman has a servant. Of course you have to have a servant if you're a gentleman. But in actuality, he just thinks that this kid's super annoying. So he has a servant. He dresses him all up in fancy clothes. And he says, I had to find him a little to do and a great deal to eat, and both of these horrible requirements he haunted my existence. So he got the servant for the sake of saying he had a servant, not because he needed one, but just because every gentleman has a servant. So I came into town on Monday night to be ready for Joe, and I got up early in the morning and caused the sitting room and the breakfast table to assume their most splendid appearance. As the time approached, I could have liked to run away, but presently I heard Joe on the staircase. I knew it was Joe by his clumsy manner of coming up the stairs. When at last he stopped outside my door, I could hear his fingers tracing over the plated letters of my name. Finally, he gave a faint single rap, and Pepper, such was the compromising name of the boy, announced, Mr. Gaudry. Joe! How are you, Joe? Pip, he said. How are you, Pip? Now remember, Joe's got like that strange way of speaking because he's from the country. With his good honest face all glowing and shining and his hat put down to the floor between us, he caught both my hands and worked them straight up and down. I'm so glad to see you, Joe. Give me your hat. But Joe, taking his hat up carefully with both hands like a bird's nest with eggs in it, wouldn't hear of parting with that piece of property. So he kind of holds on to his hat almost as like a safety thing. Pip asks how everybody's doing at home. Joe says everybody's doing good except for Mr. Wopsle. He's decided to become an actor. God forbid this guy from the church decides to become an actor. And so Joe has this funny thing about how he's a terrible actor, but that's what he wanted to do, so he's gone off to London to be an actor. Okay, so we're going to skip to page 119, halfway down. Herbert walks into the room, and Joe is like, oh gosh, what do I do now? A ghost-seeing effect in Joe's own countenance informed me that Herbert had entered the room. So I presented Joe to Herbert, who had held out his hand, but Joe backed from it and held on to his bird's nest. Joe, being invited to sit down to the table, looked all around the room for a suitable spot in which to deposit his hat, and ultimately stood it on an extreme corner of the chimney piece, for which if ever fell off at intervals. Do you take tea or coffee, Mr. Gaudry? Asked Herbert, who always presided of a morning. Thank you, sir, said Joe. I'll take whichever is most agreeable to yourself. What do you say to coffee? Well, thank you, sir, returned Joe, evidently dispirited by the proposal, since you are so kind to make a choice of coffee, but I will not run contrary to your own opinions. But don't you ever find it a little eating? Okay, we'll say tea then, said Herbert, pouring it out. Here Joe's hat tumbled off the mantelpiece and started out of his chair, picked it up, and fitted it in the exact same spot. When did you come to town, Mr. Gaudry? Were it yesterday afternoon, said Joe. No, we're not. Yes, it were. Yes, it were yesterday afternoon. Have you done anything in London yet? Why, yes, said Joe. Me and Wopsle went off straight to look at the Blacking's warehouse. We didn't find it come up to its likeness in the red bills in the shop doors. And then he fell into an unaccountable fit of meditation. With his fork midway between his plate and his mouth, he had his eyes attracted to strange directions, which afflicted with such remarkable coughs, sat so far from the table, dropped so much more than he ate, and pretended he hadn't dropped it. And then I was heartily glad when Herbert finally left us for the city. So Joe is really super awkward and being very awkward with his eating, and he's spilling stuff. And Pip, of course, is embarrassed and is really glad when Herbert leaves. And this next section, Joe starts calling Pip sir, and Pip's like, Joe, stop calling me sir. And Joe's like, well, sir, let me tell you why I came. I came to see you, but actually I came to tell you that Miss Havisham wants to see you. And Pip's like, yes, Miss Havisham wants to see me. This is awesome. And he gets all riled up about Miss Havisham wanting to see him. And Joe realizes that their friendship and their relationship is not what it was, and that Pip has changed. And it's really, 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 really sad. It's so sad because Joe is such a good-hearted man. So on page 121, there's that larger paragraph halfway down the page, and Pip says, Joe, are you staying for dinner? And Joe's like, no, I'm going to go home now. I don't belong here. He's like, I don't belong here. This place doesn't work for me. And Pip starts to realize he's being a jerk. And so Joe says, Pip, dear old chap, life is made of ever so many partings, welded together, as I may say, and one man's a blacksmith, and one's a whitesmith, and one's a goldsmith, and one's a coppersmith. Divisions among such must come, and must be met as they come. If there's been any fault at all today, it's mine. So then Joe's like, it's my fault that everything has been awkward. It's not your fault, Joe, but anyway. You and me is not two figures to be together in London, nor anywhere else but what is private and be known and understood among friends. It ain't that I am proud, but that I want to be right, as you shall never see me no more in these clothes. I'm wrong in these clothes. He says, I shouldn't have dressed up. I shouldn't have even tried to come. I'm wrong out of the forge, out of the kitchen, and off the marshes. You won't find half as much fault in me if you think of me in the forge dress with my hammer in my hand or even my pipe. He's like, Pip, you wouldn't be embarrassed of me if we were at the forge. But because I'm here, you're super embarrassed of me, and I don't want that. He says, you won't find half as much fault in me if supposing as you ever should wish to see me. If you want to see me, then you come to see me because I can't come here. You come and you put your head in the forge window and you'll see Joe the blacksmith at the old anvil in the burnt apron sticking to the old work. I'm awful dull, but I hope I've beat out something nigh in the rights of this at last. And God bless you, dear old Pip, old chap. God bless you. And Pip's like, I'm such a jerk. And in his realization that he's such a jerk, Joe pieces out and leaves. And Pip heads out after him to apologize, and Joe's already gone. So then chapter 8 happens, or 28 happens. Pip decides, oh, Miss Havisham wants to see me. I should go back to see Miss Havisham. So in chapter 28, Pip goes to see Miss Havisham. Now, it's interesting that Pip is going back to the marshes. He had just been an absolute jerk to Joe. What would a normal person do at this point in time? He would go and apologize to Joe. Well, he chooses not to. He actually even stays at the inn, at the Three Jolly Bargemen Inn, because he is so embarrassed of himself and his idiocy that he chooses not to go and see Joe at the forge and Biddy. So he goes then to see Miss Havisham. And on his way to see Miss Havisham in chapter 28, he gets in a carriage in a stagecoach. And in the stagecoach, there are two convicts that had been arrested for something or other. Not Pip's convict, but two other convicts. And the two convicts are having a conversation, and Pip's overhearing this conversation. And the one convict says, well, I've been here before. I've been out in these prison ships, out in the marshes and the hulks. I've been here. And the other one says, well, what's it like? I've never been here. What's it like? And he talks about how it's wet and it's clammy and there's cows everywhere and there's no people. He says, but one time when I was out there, another convict gave me some money and told me to go find this kid. And Pip's overhearing this. And this is the convict, the stranger in the Three Jolly Bargemen when he was like 12 or 13, that gave him the money and stirred his drink with the file. This is the convict. And the other convict says, wait a minute. Some guy gave you money and you delivered it? Why don't you just take it and go? And the convict that is the stranger says, well, I just felt that, this guy wanted this kid to have the money. He said that this kid had helped him out one time and he felt that he wanted to pay him back. And so I brought him the money. And so then the two convicts, continue talking about the hulks and how awful it's going to be back in jail. And Pip's going, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. So he's rattled by this whole experience of being with these convicts and learning that the one was the stranger from the Three Jolly Bargemen. So we're just going to jump to page 125. Yeah, we're going to jump to page 125. Okay, so Pip then goes in to Miss Havisham's house. And Sarah Pocket is still the door woman, the person who's watching the doors and letting people in and out of the house. And she hates Pip. Like, she's just so frustrated with Pip. But Pip then goes up into the house and sees Miss Havisham. So we're on page 125. A little over halfway down the page where the paragraph that starts with tolerably. So here we go. Tolerably, for I had gone up the staircase in the dark many, many a times, I ascended it now, in lighter boots than of yore, and then tapped on my old way at the door of Miss Havisham's room. Pip's rap, I heard her say immediately. Come in, Pip. She was in her chair near the old table in the old dress, with her 2 hands crossed on her stick and her chin resting on them. Her eyes were on fire. Sitting near her with the white shoe that had never been worn, was the white shoe that had never been worn, but in her hand, and her head bent as she looked at it, as elegant a lady whom I had ever seen. Come in, Pip, said Miss Havisham, continuing to mutter without looking round or up. Come in, Pip. How do you do, Pip? I heard, Miss Havisham, I said, that you were so kind as to wish me to come and see you, and so I came directly. The lady whom I had never seen before lifted up her eyes and looked archly at me, and I saw that these eyes were Stella's eyes. She had so much changed, and so much more beautiful, and so much more womanly than all things winning admiration had made such wonderful advance, and I seemed to have made none. I fancied, as I looked at her, that I slipped hopelessly back into the coarse, common boy again. Oh, the sense of distance and disparity that came upon me, and the inaccessibility that came about her. Do you find her much changed, Pip? Asked Miss Havisham. When I came in, Miss Havisham, I thought there was nothing of Estella in her face or her figure, but now it all settles down curiously into the old... What? You were not going to say into the old Estella, Miss Havisham interrupted. She was proud and insulting. And you wanted to get away from here, don't you remember? I said confusedly that was a long time ago, and I knew no better than then and the like. Estella smiled with a perfect composure and said that she had no doubt of my having been quite right, and she had been very disagreeable. Is he changed? Miss Havisham asked her. Oh, very much, said Estella, looking at me. Less coarse and common, said Miss Havisham, playing with Estella's hair. Estella laughed and looked at the shoe in her hand and laughed again and looked at me and put the shoe down. She treated me as a boy still, but she lured me on. We sat in the dreamy room among the old strange influences which had wrought upon me, and I learned that she had but just come home from France and that she was going to London. It was settled that I should stay there all the rest of the day and return to the hotel at night and to London tomorrow. When we had conversed for a while, Miss Havisham sent us 2 out to walk in the neglected garden. The garden was too overgrown and rank for walking in with ease, and after we had made round it twice or thrice, we came again to the brewing yard, and I showed her to a nicety where I had seen her walking in the casks that first all day, and she said with a cold and careless look in the direction, Did I? I reminded her of where she had come out of the house and given me my meat and my drink, and she said, I don't remember. Not remember? Not remember that you made me cry? I said. No, she said, and shook her head and looked about her. I verily believe that her not remembering and not minding in the least made me cry again inwardly, and that was the sharpest crying of all. You must know, said Estella, condescending me as a brilliant and beautiful woman might, that I have no heart, if that has anything to do with my memory. I got through some jargon on the effect that I took the liberty of doubting that, and that I knew better, and that there could be no beauty without it. But I'm serious, said Estella, not so much with a frown, for her brow was smooth, as with the darkening of her face. If we are to be thrown much together, as you better believe it at once. No, I said, imperiously stopping me as I opened my lips. I have not bestowed my tenderness elsewhere. I have never had such a thing. We went back into the house, and where I heard with some surprise that my guardian had come down to see Miss Havisham on business and would be back to dinner. The whole wintry branches of chandeliers in the room where the mouldering table was spread had lighted while we were out, and Miss Havisham was in her chair waiting for me. It was like pushing the chair itself back into the past, and then we began the old slow circuit around the ashes of the bridal feast. The time so melted away that our early dinner hour drew close at hand, and Estella left us to prepare herself. Then, Estella being gone and we 2 left alone, she turned to me and said in a whisper, Is she beautiful, graceful, well-grown? To admire her. Everyone must who sees her, Miss Havisham. She drew her arm around my neck and drew my head close down to her own as she sat in the chair. Love her, love her, love her. How does she use you? Before I could answer, as if I could have answered such a difficult question at all, she repeated, Love her, love her, love her. If she favors you, love her. If she wounds you, love her. If she tears your heart to pieces, and as it gets older and stronger, it'll tear deeper, love her, love her, love her. I'll tell you, she said in the same hurried, passionate whisper, what real love is. It is blind devotion and unquestioning self-humiliation, utter submission, trust and belief against yourself and against the whole world, giving up your whole heart and soul to the smiter, as I did. When she last came to that, and a wild cry that followed it, I caught her around the waist, for she rose up out of her chair, and in her shroud of a dress, and struck the air, as if she would soon have struck herself against the wall and fallen dead. All this passed in a few seconds, and as I drew her down into her chair, I was conscious of a scent that I knew, and turning, saw my guardian in the room. So again, we see like this crazy Miss Havisham who's trying to make others feel the pain that she felt when she was left at the altar. And, you know, her whole insane revenge scheme on, you know, men in general. So they went and have dinner, and Mr. Jaggers has arrived. Miss Havisham had seen him as soon as I, and, like everything else, was afraid of him. She made a great attempt to compose herself and stammered that he was as punctual as ever. As punctual as ever, said he repeated, coming up to us. And so you are here, Pip. I told him that I had arrived and how Miss Havisham wished to come and see Estella, to which he replied, very fine young lady. Well, Pip, how often have you seen Estella before? He said. How often? Yeah, how many times? 10,000 times? Oh, certainly not so many. Twice. Jaggers, interposed Miss Havisham, much to my relief. Leave my Pip alone, and go with him to your dinner. He complied, and I groped our way down the dark staircase together. Pray, sir, may I ask you a question? You may, he said, and I might decline to answer it, but put out your question. Estella's name, is it Havisham? I had nothing to add. Or what? He said. Well, is it Havisham? It is Havisham. This brought us to the dinner table where Sarah Pocket, awaited us. Mr. Jaggers presided, Estella sat opposite to him, and I faced my green and yellow friend. We dined very well and were waited on by a maidservant whom I've never seen in all my comings and goings, but who, for anything else I had known, had been there the whole time. And then through the whole dinner, Jaggers is like keenly paying attention to Estella. And Pip's not entirely sure what that's all about, but Pip goes back to his room after dinner, says goodbye to Miss Havisham and goodbye to Estella, and goes back and goes to bed. And the whole time, Miss Havisham's love her is just playing over and over in his head, and is driving him kind of crazy. All right, so that is all the way through chapter 29. You know what? We're just gonna plow through 30 and 31 so that we're done, and you guys can do your core sites for these section of chapters. So real quick, we're just gonna jump through this fast like bunnies here. So chapter 30, we go through, and he gets home. Herbert says, dude, Pip, you seem really depressed. What's going on? And Pip finally confesses. He's like, Herbert, I love Estella. And Herbert's like, duh. Of course you love Estella. You've been ridiculous about her since I met you. And Pip's like, what do you mean you knew? He's like, of course I knew. You've been mooning over this girl since I met you. So yeah, of course you love Estella. And so Herbert doesn't understand why he loves Estella. But Herbert's like, if you love Estella, okay, good luck, dude. So that's kind of the conversation that they have. And as they continue going through, on page 131, they start discussing this whole idea of possibly Miss Havisham being the benefactor. And they both kind of know who they're talking about, but because Pip's not allowed to ask any questions, you know, he doesn't really want to say it straight out. So they just kind of have this conversation about whether or not Miss Havisham is the benefactor, and if she is the benefactor, what does that mean for her plans in the future for Pip? So on page 131, they're having a conversation, and Herbert says, Pip, I need to tell you something. And he says, okay, all right, what? And he's like, well, this is what I think. I think I'm gonna make you be mad at me, but we'll just, get over it. Here's what I think. Herbert says, a little bit that little paragraph says, oh yes, I shall, he said. Handle, my good fellow, I have been thinking since that we have been talking with our feet in this fender that Estella cannot surely be a condition of your inheritance if she was ever referred to by your guardian. Am I so to understand what you have told me is that he has never referred to her directly or indirectly in any way, never even hinted, for instance, that your patron might have views as to your marriage ultimately? He's like, if she was part of the party and part of the bargain, someone would have said something by now. And Pip says never. They've never said anything. Now Handel, remember, Herbert calls Pip Handel because that's his nickname. Now Handel, I'm quite free from this flavor of sour grapes upon my soul and honor, not being bound to her. Can you not detach yourself from her? Can't you just, get over her? I told you that I should be disagreeable. I turned my head aside, and there was silence between us for a little. Yes, but my dear Handel, said Herbert, think of her bringing up, and think of Miss Havisham. Think of her, of what she is herself. This may lead to miserable things. I know, Herbert, I said, with my head still turned away, but I can't help it. Well, said Herbert, now I'll endeavor to make myself even agreeable again. I was going to say a word or two, Handel, conceiving my father and my father's son, but I might ask if you have ever had the opportunity of remarking, down to your part of the country, that the children of not exactly suitable marriages are always the most particularly anxious to be married. This was a singular question, and I asked him in return, is it so? But I don't know, said Herbert. That's what I wanted to know, because it is decidedly the case with us. I think we are all engaged, except the baby. Then you are, I said. I am, said Herbert, but it's a secret. I assured him of my keeping his secret and begged to be favored with further particulars, and he had spoken so sensibly in feelings of my weakness that I wanted to know something about his strengths. So Herbert says, I'm so sorry, but I really think you need to get over Estella. By the way, I'm engaged. And Pip's like, well, good for you. And we find out that Herbert's fiance's name's Clara. She lives with her father, who is going insane. He's essentially drinking himself to death. And Herbert's like, I can't wait for this guy to drink himself to death because we can't tell her dad that we're engaged because her dad would probably kill me because he's insane. So when eventually her father passes, we're going to get married. But we've got this secret engagement thing going on. And Pip is excited for him, but is just one more extra dagger in poor Pip's heart. All right, chapter 31. Pip gets a letter from Estella, of course, because, his life isn't complicated enough. And her letter says, I am come to London the day after tomorrow by the midday coach. I believe that it was settled that you should meet me. In all events, Miss Havisham has that impression, and I write it in obedience to it. She sends you her regard. Yours, Estella. So he was eating breakfast when he got this letter, and he says, my appetite vanished instantly, and I knew no peace nor rest until the day arrived. Not that its arrival brought me either, for I was worse than ever, began haunting the coach office on Ward Street, Cheapside, before the coach had even left Blue Boar in our town. For all that I knew this perfectly well, I still felt as if it were not safe to let the coach office be out of my sight longer than 5 minutes. The coach came quickly after all, and I saw her face at the coach window, and her hand waving at me. All right, so you guys need to finish your course sites, and I'm sorry, just because of the nature of the beast, you're going to have to do that on your own time. So you need to find some time in a study hall or after school or, oh, God forbid, homework. You guys need to work on the course sites for this section, chapters 24 through 31. There's a discussion board for that. And any of the character Facebook posts that you have not done and want to catch up on, now would be a good time to maybe do another one for Estella, one for Herbert, whoever you haven't done yet. But we need those done by the end of this week, Monday at the absolute latest, because I need to get those grades in for the end of the marking period. All right, cool beans. We'll play this game again later, but I'm definitely spent. So have a great day. Talk to you later.